Most brands are on social media, but they fall plenty short of our expectations. They tend to lack a bit of focus. They often seem off-brand. So what are the fundamentals for brands on social, and how do we avoid losing our way on these platforms? MC, g'day.
Hello, Dave. How you doing?
Good. Back again for another week.
Yes. Here we go.
You spend a lot of time on social media, more than I do.
How do you know?
So I was thinking that that you were going to come with a goal today.
Oh, okay. Pressure's on.
Pressure's on.
Sure.
What are some of the fundamentals? What are the things that we should be thinking about as brands before we go and proliferate our story on social media?
Yeah, it's a good question. Particularly, I think we're trying to approach the topic a little bit more from a brand and branding perspective, than necessarily top 10 social media tricks and tips type approach. And so I guess my first answer is probably a boring one or repetitive.
There you go. I'm keen for boringness.
Yeah, it's really just about authenticity again. I think if we had a drinking game on this podcast about the amount of times that I said that word, everyone that listened would be wasted. But, I think that's, it's just so fundamental to me, to brand and branding in general is about being authentic, and, it's almost just heightened, exponentially on social, that it's a place to be sometimes even your most authentic self as a brand. A lot of people are looking for behind the scenes type content or a real insight into the personality of the brand and the people behind it, that sort of thing, when they're looking to social channels. So certainly authenticity is the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think before you do marketing, before you do social media, you've got to think about brand fundamentals. Yeah. And I think brand fundamentals really hark at that particular topic of being authentic, and also your values, the core messages, and your identity and how you want to portray yourself out there in public life, I guess is the
exactly.
lack of better terminology.
Yeah, a lot of it really is going all the way back to the brand strategy and what that is, as you say, it's all those fundamentals. So it goes really all the way back to episode 1 for us, where it's defining, as you say, all those things that you want to stand for and what the strategy is and how you're going to have, I guess, portray your values. And so then the social aspect, I guess, just becomes one tentacle off that, how we're going to demonstrate this is our brand personality, how are we going to reinforce this is our brand position, how are we going to showcase our values in a human way, if that's part of what you're about. So really, I think the first point of call is your brand strategy that you've hopefully developed, and making sure that is informing your social media strategy.
Yeah, it's a curious thing to me that I think of a number of different brands, even brands that we've worked with as well too, where they have a really solid core message to their brand, and yet it doesn't come through on social media. Like, you might just see a social media feed full of dogs and office life, and you don't. Some of that is like a bit of office life and being a bit transparent, and maybe it's a culture thing. But it's interesting how sometimes that can be the dominant story that you're telling through social media, and it doesn't really get to the fundamental of that brand and what they stand for.
Yeah, I've got another aspect here around finding that right mix, that right balance to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I think that the other part of that really is do people just sort of assume, this is how I should behave on Instagram, to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And act like other brands on Instagram, almost just play into the expected behavior rather than what's true to their brand. So, other brands post memes on Facebook, so therefore I'll start posting memes, when maybe humor isn't part of your brand at all. But, there's just kind of this almost pre-prescribed personas for each platform of how you should act. And I think to your point, people just kind of fall into that trap. Yeah. I've seen this other brand do this thing, so I should do it too. Not really questioning whether that's right for their message or positioning.
Yeah, it's such a curious thing, and I think it's why I think many brands lose their way, is because the brand strategy just tends to fall off the cliff when it comes to what they do on social. And I guess to your point that you're making, I mean, I would say that many brands need to go above the context of their business. So what I mean by that is it's not just about your products or services, but it's actually about the bigger thing that you want to talk about as a brand. So for example, if you do coffee scrubs as a brand, you're not probably going to be talking about that specifically all the time. You want to be talking about, I don't know, what is real beauty, for example.
Yeah, right.
Or if you're an accounting firm, why don't you talk about entrepreneurship as opposed to, you know, I guess your core service offering, as a couple of examples there. But I think it's going above the context of your business and trying to promote that bigger thing that your brand stands for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, again, relating it back to the strategy piece that we talked about, that's your why, right? Like getting your deeper mission out there is a great channel for that. So
and I think, I mean, look, especially when you run a social media strategy, and for people that are listening who will understand this, is like it's a content hungry beast as well too. So you're always looking for new angles and new ways to tell the story.
Yeah.
And I think that is also a challenge as well too, is when you're looking for multiple ways to tell a story, it always has to come back to that central point as well, like a reference point of values and core mission and why.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to do different formats of content.
I think, though, that's a good example of where almost, a tactical tip, which is, I guess, to sort of almost identify a few different buckets that you could, or types of content that you could, sort of assign and then mix up and find that balance. So, as you say, you might have a certain amount of posts that are about more your bigger mission and sort of broader ideas and values. You might have some posts that are just purely about your product or service and being a lot more direct and factual, if you like. And then you might have behind the scenes content or culture stuff, and, you can come up with more. But I think it helps in your planning if you sort of have an idea of the different types of content and messaging that you want to post about. And then you can sort of get into how frequently you should do each type, and then you start to plan out content around those, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're definitely good tips. Controversial segue, but I mean,
the segue is controversial, or the topic is controversial.
Well, I mean, the question is, should brands even be on social media? Full stop. I mean, as users, do we want brands to be there? I mean, and do you? I mean, what is your personal experience on this? I mean, do you follow brands on social media?
Certainly do. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to a couple of things, like one being platform brand fit. Certain brands, I think, work better on different platforms. I mean, we sort of even touched on this a little bit in the last pod around, I do think that retail and consumer goods, for example, do really well on Instagram. And I certainly follow a couple of brands there where I like their mix of product content, but they sort of do share, I guess, a bit of lifestyle content that exists around the product. So, for example, it might be you might follow a surf brand and, see their products, but then they're also obviously posting about surf, culture and lifestyle and that sort of thing. So that's interesting.
Yep.
But I think the second part of it is, if there's definitely some brands where it's even more challenging as well on any platform. And that really, to me, just becomes a challenge to that brand to find something useful and entertaining, or whatever the case may be, to post. Ultimately, I guess there probably is some brands where it's not right for them. But I think certainly choosing the platform that most aligns with your brand and focusing there first. But also just figuring out what you're trying to say and why people would care about it is kind of fundamental to answering that question, I guess, of should they be on there.
Yeah.
I mean, another part of it too, we actually hear this a lot, and I think we're even guilty of thinking this ourselves sometimes about our own brand, is like, oh, well, what's the point of doing Facebook, because people aren't on Facebook looking for our service, or, our customers aren't on social media is a common cry that we hear. But if you think about it the other way, well, everybody, pretty much literally everybody in the world is on social media, so your customers, whoever they are on there.
Yep.
It certainly might be more challenging for your type of business to cut through and get to them at the right time and deliver a message that they're interested in. But I think the fundamental answer is yes, you should be on there in some way in almost any case.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me it's a battle of storytelling as well too. Maybe battle's the wrong word. Maybe it's just understanding the craft of storytelling in the context of your brand. I read a case study before we came on about Pop-Tarts, which is not a thing that we have. It's not Australian culture, but it's obviously a huge thing in the US, and for Kellogg's it's a massive product line for them. And it's interesting, even they were able to concoct something from essentially a food product. And a lot of it is kind of based in around what you put between the Pop-Tart and like how you layer it and telling sort of stories around food, which is kind of, so I mean, even something as benign as that, can have a story to tell.
Yeah, I think that probably touches on a bit of an interesting trend, I think, too. I mean, not so much a trend as in that it hasn't existed before, but I think it's a lot of brands are finding ways to ramp it up, which is involving your customers in your social media content. So, you'll see a lot of brands now where they'll create Instagram stories, for example, that are just a series of other users' stories referencing their, or tagging their product. Plants in a Box, who's one of the brands that we work with, they do a really good job, so an influencer or any sort of user might receive their delivery in the mail and then do an unboxing video on like an Instagram story, and then Plants in a Box will go and collate all those together and create some engaging stories of their own, and it shows customer love. And I think that's a great way of showing social proof and engagement, and that it's not just this perfect image that we're projecting, but here's real people using our product and enjoying it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the other interesting thing that I read earlier this week on social, and this is actually a Harvard report, I think it was done back in 2017, talking about that it's been really hard for like the big corporates, the big brands of the world to crack the top 500 on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
Whereas, with massive budgets, by the way, and whereas like, say, individual, kind of content creators have been able to win with like a budget that's like $100,000 because it's essentially them and they are the brand.
Yep.
But yeah, how they've really struggled to capture, market share and get viewership on YouTube. It's just an interesting. It's interesting, like that the big guys are still really struggling with this, and I think if you look into it more closely, a lot of it's got to do with the fact that the stories aren't being told correctly. They seem to be off-brand still, and also, like you were saying before, it's not being told by the brand story. It's not being told by the customer as well too. So you don't have any of that element of it. Yeah, it's just all a bit one-way traffic.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it as well comes back to that sort of authenticity mixed with storytelling, like you were talking about. Like, do those big brands have something really authentic to say that is at the same time entertaining and engaging? Like maybe their products are a bit dull, so what are you really going to say about them? Maybe they don't have as clear or an interesting as a why, so they don't have that sort of thing. And I'm sure they're probably a bit more conservative too. I mean, if you look at the most popular YouTubers, they're all probably tend to be more in the shock jock kind of category as well, which is not something a big brand's going to play into.
Well, that's probably a bit risky in terms of a strategy.
I think it really just, like, a lot of that to me comes back to your question before around should brands be on, X social platform? If they don't have anything to say, then probably not. Like, just doing it to tick the box is not the right idea either.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's the point. If you don't have anything compelling to say, you might as well not be there, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort to conduct a really good brand story on any platform. So yeah, if you don't have anything compelling to say, then you should probably just shut up.
Yeah, sure.
All right, what else you got? You got anything else on?
I think the last two trends for me, if you like, that I've noticed is that definitely live streaming is becoming a bigger and bigger thing for social. So a lot more brands, but consumers too are doing live videos, whether it's Instagram or Facebook. live streaming platforms like Twitch are just getting more and more popular. So that's just something interesting, I guess, to keep in mind. I mean, I think part of that trend is probably to do with, again, you know, it's interesting. You've talked about social media in the past always as a way to be more authentic and break down the barriers. You know, you might, to some of the story stuff we were talking about before, you might even see social as a way to supplement and tell a story that you wouldn't necessarily tell on your website, for example, like going really deep into your why. But it's funny, we always used to talk about, you know, social initially as doing that, but then along came kind of the perfect veneer version, you know, where you preened your Instagram profile within an inch of its life, and then stories came along to then be kind of the authentic version of, you know, of posting. And to me,
it disappeared after a short period of time, so it wasn't too much embarrassment.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah, you know. So that was all about being more real and authentic, and I think live's just the next kind of extension of that, you know, even as taking it further in terms of being real and raw. You know, anything can happen live, and even where you can curate your stories a bit, you kind of just, when you're live sort of thing. So it's interesting, I guess, to see that. You know, from a brand point of view, you could do, you know, be live streaming a launch event, or, you know, like live streaming unboxing your latest product, or any of those sorts of things. So there's some interesting stuff, I think, to be doing there.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about live is that it does give you another opportunity to be human, and to get behind a brand, and to connect with the people. And I think that's the interesting factor of live video. Is that you can't really curate every moment of it. It is what it is, and that's human. Yeah.
I mean, another interesting use of live too is like an Ask Me Anything type scenario, where you might jump on as a representative of the brand and answer a bunch of questions, you know. So again, that's kind of giving that extra transparency layer and engagement, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then I guess something similar just off the back of that though is just video content in general. You know, so a lot more people sharing a lot of more video content, snippets and stuff to their social feeds, you know, whether it be a little bit of a snippet of a podcast like we do to our social feed, you know, or, you know, deliberate video content that's created purely to educate or inform, and then posting that to your social channels. That just seems to be becoming quite popular too.
Yeah, they're two really good tactical things that you can do that sort of have that baked in brand fundamental to it. Yeah.
Nice. That's
cool
it for me.
Good stuff. All right. Well, I reckon that's a good place to leave this week.
Nice.
Thanks, MC.
No worries. Chat to you soon.